Hello and welcome back to The Pilot Principle. I'm Jen and this is the podcast where I force the pilot episode to carry the entire weight of a series on its back like something out of a Greek myth. Today we are fictionalizing reality with the pilot episode of ITV's Three Little Birds. Here's how we do over here. We start by running through the credits because I love knowing who's who and what else they've done. I'll then give you a 2-line summary of the pilot episode, then explain what drew me to the programme in the first place. Next, you can close your eyes as I paint a picture of the first 10 minutes for you before moving on to looking at the main characters from the pilot episode. Finally, after looking at some of my favourite and potentially least favourite things from the pilot, I'll let you know whether or not I'll be continuing with the series, or at least the second episode, and why. With that being said, here's what we're working with for I want to call it a semi-historical drama. So let's go with that. Here's what we're working with for the semi-historical drama, Three Little Birds. Sadly, it does not have a pilot title, and I just think it's quite lazy, Just injects just a drop more of creativity in there by giving me something to work with as a title. None of this 1, 2, 3 nonsense. Personally, I would have given this the pilot title of This Is England. I'm just saying, look how easy it is to come up with a pilot title. The episode length for the pilot, which we will sadly not be calling This Is England, is 46 minutes, which is standard. The pilot episode was written by Lenny Henry, who also created the series and is one of the executive producers. Sir Lenny Henry has a healthy filmography as a comedian and actor, which includes The Fosters and The Lenny Henry Show. But to give you a few of his recent heavy hitters, he has starred in Broadchurch, Doctor Who and The Sandman, and Jesus, with the amount of times these 3 shows keep coming up, it would just be easier to refer to them as the Holy Trinity. But anyway, Henry also had a role in The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, and The Witcher, Blood Origin, which I really enjoyed as a little prequel taster to the world of The Witcher. The pilot episode of Three Little Birds, see what a mouthful that is and how easy it would be if I just had a pilot title, was directed by Charles McDougall, who cut his teeth directing on the likes of Casualty and Queer as Folk before he went Hollywood. So he has directed episodes of Sex and the City, Desperate Housewives, Big Love, The Good Wife, which I love, Parks and Recreations, The Office, House of Cards, The Mindy Project, and the recent television adaptations of 4 Weddings and a Funeral and Julia. Blimey. Moving on to the cast list, Three Little Birds stars Rochelle Neal as Leah Whittaker. She has starred in episodes of Death in Paradise, 2 episodes of Doctors, and she was in the TV adaptation of Zadie Smith's NW. She was also in 7 episodes of Das Boot, 4 episodes of The Guilt, and the series The Nevers. Next, we have Saffron Comer as Chanterelle Brahms. She's been in an episode of The Bill, an episode of Doctors, and played Sapphire Fox in Tracy Beaker Returns. What a throwback. Comer has also had roles in Holby City, EastEnders, Cuffs, Flack, and a role in Steve McQueen's Lovers Rock. Finally, of the main cast, we have Yasmin Bello, who plays Hosanna Drake. This is her first major acting role, but she has been in 2 shorts, Mother's Cry and What Just Happened. The pilot episode also stars Javon Prince as Aston Brahms, and Prince has been in Little Miss Jocelyn back in the day. He has also had roles in Outnumbered, Horrible Histories, Death in Paradise, the Disney live-action remake of 101 Dalmatians, Cruella. Is it a remake? Let's just go with it. He's also starred in the James Bond movie No Time to Die and the BBC series Dodger. Finally, we have the familiar face of Arthur Darvill, who plays Ernest Wantage. Darvill is known for his time in the TARDIS during Matt Smith's reign as the Doctor. He's also starred in Broadchurch, had a main role in the DC series Legends of Tomorrow, and was, of course, in an episode of Netflix's The Sandman. The Holy Trinity rears its head once again. Because I've recently done a whole Doctor Who special where I looked at the pilot episode for each Doctor since the 2005 revival, it feels like I would be doing a disservice not to tell you that one of the executive producers for Three Little Birds is Russell T Davies. Okay, rounding up, Three Little Birds will have a series length of 6 episodes and is being shown on ITV1. The series name, Three Little Birds, is, I believe, but at me if I'm wrong, taken from the Bob Marley and the Wailers song of the same name. The song name might not sound familiar, but I'm sure the lyrics will be if I tell you not to worry about a thing, because every little thing is going to be all right. Let's get into the pilot synopsis. In the 1950s, Three women, for three very different reasons, make a journey across the sea from Jamaica to England. However, following their first night, it's clear that the tales they've received from home, painting England as the perfect place, were more than a little exaggerated, but they won't give up on their chance for a new home without a fight. Personally, I have known about the upcoming drama for about, I want to say 3 years now, so it's always been in my periphery. However, it wasn't until I was watching Sky News and I saw they were interviewing Sir Lenny Henry about the programme that I knew it was being released and thought, why the hell not? I also haven't looked at an ITV series yet on the pilot principle, and it was this or 6'4" starring Kevin McKidd, and I chose Three Little Birds. But man oh man do I enjoy Kevin McKidd. He plays Dr. Owen Hunt on Grey's Anatomy, for those who haven't yet had the pleasure of diving into the drama that is Grey Sloan Memorial Hospital. But back to Three Little Birds. Here's what the first 10 minutes are looking like. A woman, who we later learn is Leah, is digging a hole in the base of a tree where she hides a large wad of cash in an envelope. This is Kingston, Jamaica in 1957, and we then cut to watching as well-dressed men and women board a ship. This includes the woman we saw burying the cash, Leah, who now looks like a weight has been lifted off of her shoulders. Then we watch a second woman board, Hosanna, who looks apprehensive, and finally a third, Chantrell, who looks confident. The passengers aboard the ship are waved off and they set sail on a 3-week journey to England. We learn that two of the women, Leah and Chantrell, are sisters, and that the third woman, Hosanna, is heading over to meet and hopefully marry their brother Aston, who is already living in England. There's a brief montage of the three women in their shared room praying, getting sick of one another, and looking wistfully out of a circular window towards their destination. Their destination is, of course, England, and when they arrive at Tilbury Dock, the first thing that they take in is how cold it is. They get in line at the immigration office where they each have their passports stamped, and they wait for Leah's brother, who is meant to be collecting the three of them. He's currently running a little late, and Hosanna isn't pleased about that. But he does eventually arrive and he meets his two sisters with glee. There's loads of hugs and emotionalness happening there before he's finally presented with his future potential wife, Hosanna. And she's not exactly what he was hoping for, but I think it's safe to say she would say the same too. The four of them bundle up into his car and he sets off for London, where they'll be spending one night before he, Hosanna and Leah make the journey up to Dudley in the Midlands, where he lives. Now, I was always taught that the first 10 minutes of a TV pilot or feature film script is where you need to grip your audience and never let them go, which is why I always pay close attention to the opening. Of the series, Sir Lenny Henry has said directly that it is not about his mother or any of his family members. It is an accumulation of the various stories his mother told him as he was growing up about back home and what life was like in England for people who arrived in the 50s and 60s. Okay, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's move on to the main characters. First, we have Leah, and she is a woman who is clearly used to dealing with the hard stuff in life, from her marriage to the responsibilities of being an older sister to a woman like Chantrell. She also strikes me as loyal, determined, and a person with a clear focus. She has come to England to work. The money she makes will be sent home to look after her children, and also saved so that she can eventually pay for a ship ticket to bring them over. It's easy to admire a woman like Leah. She is a clear reflection of many women who have trodden the same path. Next, we have Chantrell, and she's the quintessential little sister. She's all about loving life and living it to the fullest without thinking too tough about the future or the consequences of actions. Chantrell is also determined like her sister Leah. She has aspirations of being an actress and fears getting pregnant and having a baby ruin all her plans. She is, if I'm not mistaken, also mixed race, which might come into play later. She hasn't quite yet reached that Lydia Bennet level of irritation, and I hope it stays that way because right now I'm already worried about her, but I'm definitely rooting for her. Finally, we have Hosanna, and Hosanna's character is interesting because she didn't really care about leaving Jamaica behind. She is a God-fearing woman, and for the most part, that's her personality. I will also say, though, that she seems to be a proud woman, but not in a negative way, in the way of a person who knows who they are and how others perceive them, but continues to hold their head up high, as she should, Queen. Finally, we have Aston, and he sold England to his sister through rose-coloured glasses. But he's been in the country a while, and he will be their guide in how to act and get what you need from the people who don't want you around. Aston so far seems nice. He's not quite the bumbling fool, though we do get the idea that he's not very good with money. In terms of antagonists for the pilot episode of Three Little Birds, I would personally say that the antagonist is England and the police, okay? There's definitely a sense of abandon or hope, ye who enter here, okay, when it comes to England from their perspective. Okay, but seriously, there technically isn't an antagonist yet. But let's not forget, people, that an antagonist can also be a thing as well as a person. So I'm sticking with England and the police as my final answer. I do have a favourite line from the pilot episode of Three Little Birds. It happens after someone has been arrested. Leah asks her brother Aston, "Why didn't you tell me how bad it was here?" And he replies honestly, "If I told you that, you wouldn't have come." It's a gut punch of honesty, not just for the characters, but for the reality of what Caribbeans face coming to England in the 50s, 60s, and beyond. A lot of them didn't know they'd be walking into a place where they would face abuse daily and made to feel like an outsider, despite being asked to come by the very government that pretended not to see what they were facing. The dialogue between Leah and Aston really does beg the question. If they, Caribbeans, had known how much hardship they would face, how many of them wouldn't so much have stepped foot on a boat bound in this direction? Fast forwarding to the end of the episode Hook, the family has been separated. Chantrell to start her job as a live-in nanny and hopeful film star, and Leah, Hosanna and Aston heading up to Dudley, which Aston paints with a more hopeful picture compared to London. With the end of the pilot episode, I look towards what the serial arc could be, and with Three Little Birds, there's nothing specific that comes to mind except for Chantrell trying to be a film star, because they've all come to London, to England, to start their life from scratch. Yes, Leah's husband could follow her, but I wouldn't really be so worried about that. It's a 3-week journey after all to get from the Caribbean to England. So I imagine that the series will just be looking at the highs and lows of their life in England compared to what they had when they were back home in Jamaica. And so overall, I thought Three Little Birds was a sweet story. Heck, it airs at 8 p.m. on ITV1. I wouldn't expect anything too raw. We met our characters, they went on a journey, they've still got a journey to come. Yeah, it was fine. The only real question I have from finishing the pilot episode is, what kind of character will Arthur Darvill's Ernest Wantage be? He is the patriarch of the family where Chantrell goes to be nanny for the kids, and he asks to see her passport and then he slips it into her pocket, and I was like, oh, what kind of funny business is happening here? Because Arthur Darvill's character on The Sandman was an antagonist, and so I'm wondering if he's just going to be going down the antagonistic type casting roles, and so yeah, I'm wary, and so that is the main draw for me to continue and watch the second episode of Three Little Birds. And so now we've gotten to that moment already. Will I continue with Three Little Birds? Pause for dramatic effect. No, and here's why. Firstly, the tone was a bit off for me, and by that I mean 1 second the characters were dancing at a party and everything is innocent, then suddenly everything gets really racist, and then later on nobody really addresses any of that, and then we get flashbacks that are either very long or very short. I mean, at one point we got a flashback so long I forgot that we were in England. I thought the story was taking place in Jamaica. So yeah, that was just a bit all over the place for me. And speaking of all over the place, secondly, I don't know where the series is going, and there's nothing really pushing me to find out. I mean, the pilot episode almost ends with a happily ever after as Leah, Aston and Hosanna drive up to the Midlands with the hopes that it's going to be better than the one night that they spent in London. And so as a pilot episode, that's not enough to draw me in and have me wanting to click on to the second episode. I won't lie to you though, there was a thin thread of intrigue in the pilot episode that made me pause and consider whether I would continue. And that's because firstly, it's such a light watch. Secondly, we've gone on a journey across the sea with these three women, and I want to know if it was a journey worth taking for them. And finally, it's the history. I mean, art mimics life, and watching Three Little Birds would be a great way to hear those stories unfold, just like in Steve McQueen's Small Axe anthology. But alas, with the pilot principle, it's a yay or it's a nay, and in this case, it's a nay. In terms of what I would score the pilot episode of Three Little Birds, I would give it a 2 out of 5. The opening 10 minutes was relatively slow. It dragged in the middle with the back and forth of the police station, and the ending didn't leave me on red, wanting to know what happens next. The use of flashbacks as a device felt like a band-aid, and by that I mean it cheated the present characters out of thinking or feeling and having us see that in that moment. Finally, as a pilot episode, everything was laid bare and it feels like there's nothing left to discover. Now, I could of course be wrong, but it's called the pilot principle, people, and I'm only here to judge that first episode. Now that we've hashed out the fundamental principles, will you be giving the pilot episode of Three Little Birds a watch? Let me know over on Twitter/X @pilotprinciple. Make sure to follow and rate this podcast on your audio streamer of choice, and I'll catch you on the next episode.